All right, now for years there's been stress between the U.S. and China. Trying to find a solution to help synergize the two superpowers is not easy, but Peter Coy has laid out 5 ways the U.S. can move forward with China in Bloomberg Businessweek's latest issue. Peter is the magazine's economics editor and has covered the beat for the magazine for more than 2 decades. Before that, he was at the Associated Press. Peter, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk first about, aren't we all cool now after China made that move on Saturday?
Yeah, well, that's what we were kind of hoping. And in fact, Monday, the 21st, first day of summer, it looked pretty good. The yuan made quite a substantial climb against the dollar. And people were saying, OK, this is exactly what we're looking for. And then the next day, it gave up half of those gains. And now the forwards market is looking for like maybe a 2% increase in the yuan against the dollar over the coming year, which is really just not a big move.
And you actually write out in your article, Peter, you talk about 5 ways that the U.S. could get the most out of its economic links with China. Kind of going through the headlines kind of catch your attention. Yeah. First, you say block China. What exactly do you say?
And just to be clear, I'm not advocating these 5. They're just kind of laying them out as scenarios. The block China one would be the most extreme. Paul Krugman has talked about this. This would be like a temporary 25% surcharge on all imports from China to push them to make a substantial revaluation of the yuan. And on the one hand, yes, well, that would have the effect of keeping out Chinese imports.
Right.
The downside, of course, is that it would make the U.S. almost an outlaw in trade talks.
And could backfire.
Could backfire.
In a number of ways.
Right.
In a number of unpleasant ways.
I mean, talking tough, not always a smart way to proceed here with the Chinese.
Right. So the China, the argument is, well, the gentle way hasn't worked, so let's try the tough way.
Right.
So anyway, that's number 1. Number 2 is sort of a variant of that, maybe not quite as extreme, where you would put a tariff on imports from all countries. And you would just say, OK, well, then we're not singling out any single country.
Right.
And therefore maybe a little bit less liable to run afoul of the WTO, World Trade Organization rules. Problem's still there. The U.S. does not look like a world leader in trade when it does something like that.
What about sticking with the WTO? I mean, it hasn't seemed to work so well so far.
Right.
If you keep at it, is that an option?
Well, actually, just by chance today, I was at a lunch with Pascal Lamy, the head of the World Trade Organization, and he did make one pretty persuasive point, which is that the WTO is almost like a name and shame kind of thing. They may not have a whole lot of power. They don't have artillery, but they can say, this country did this thing against our rules. This country did this kind of thing. And just being out there and making it public does seem to have an effect. In fact, China has attempted to comply with a letter of the WTO rules. So they may have violated the spirit, some would argue.
Right.
But the very fact that there is a mechanism is a good thing.
There's one you point out, talk, talk, talk. I mean, it sounds kind of basic, but it's important to keep the channels of communication open here, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of what we're doing, though.
We're doing that, but what we have done, and this is a positive, it may not be recognized as a positive, under the George W. Bush administration and now continuing under Obama, the United States has expanded the range of contacts it has with China.
Right.
So it's no longer just narrow trade issues, tires and steel and so on. It's the strategic and economic dialogue, which is getting into currency and economic issues. And so we're meeting the Chinese at various levels and some non-governmental levels as well. You might remember the Green Dam controversy last year with filters on computers.
Right.
And it was a Chinese internet community itself that stepped up and knocked that thing down.
And we should point out the final one is get America's house in order, which I think we should do, whether or not we're dealing with the Chinese.
But it's so fantastic that we don't even have to discuss it. And we don't have time anyway. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. Peter Coy, covering economics for Bloomberg Businessweek. We take a quick break here.
Hitting the newsstands. Check it out.